And welcome back to 12 Steps to Poker Heaven. I'm Carmel, and with me here is the lovely Grub. And in part one, we looked at pre-flop strategy.
That's it. We spoke about the importance of assessing your opposition, seeing who looks dangerous, who looks a bit tired, watching them to see who's weak and who's aggressive. We also spoke about the importance of position and how the big blind is actually quite a good position pre-flop because you're the last to act.
Great. Well, it's now time to look at what happens after the first community cards are dealt.
Pre-flop, you're mostly playing your whole cards. You don't have a lot of information, but when that flop comes down with 3 cards, you are given a whole lot of data to play with. You can see whether you've got a good draw, a flush draw, a straight draw. You can see whether you've got an overcard or whether you've made a pair. You can also obviously study how your opponents react to the flop, not just how they bet, but how they look when they see it. You should be always watching your opponents when the flop comes down. You know what your cards are. You don't need to look at them. Look at your opponent's eyes.
And what would you say are the most common post-flop mistakes that you frequently come across?
Well, I think people overvalue pocket pairs. If you've got a pair of 7s and the flop comes down with a 10, a jack and a 3, you'll see a lot of people calling bets with the 7s. Now, I have a rule which is if you don't hit, quit. And you can go broke very, very quickly chasing that third elusive 7 or 6 or whatever it is to make your hand. Some people will overplay top pair as well. If we look at the ranking of the hands, you'll see that one pair is actually quite low on the ranking of the hands. But a lot of people, if they say they hit an ace, will call the most enormous bets. They've got ace 10, it comes down ace, jack, king. And they'll think, well, I've got top pair with a decent kicker, I'm going to bet this. But of course, a lot of the time they'll be playing into 2 pairs or a straight or a flush draw, and they're going to get badly burnt. Another thing is over-betting the flop. A lot of people will see a little bit of action in the flop, they'll think, oh, I like the look of this, and they'll put in quite a lot of money. Now, there isn't much in the flop, in the pot at this stage, so they're risking a lot to win not very much. And if they do walk into a trap, suddenly they're exposed. They've put so much money in there that they may think they have to follow up with the rest of their money. So you shouldn't throw it down a well. It's a poker game, not a wishing well. And lastly, a lot of people will get into trouble slow playing hands. Again, if you've got, say, pocket 7s and the flop came down 7, jack, 3 with 2 spades out there, you think, wow, I've made my set of 7s, I'm off to the races here. But you've got to watch out for those flush draws and straight draws which can rain on your parade. So you should bet when you're ahead. Slow playing, it's called being cute, trying to sandbag people. You're trying to get people to bet into you. Sometimes it'll work, but when it goes wrong, you will go bust in a hurry.
Great, thank you. Well, let's look at an example from the World Speed Poker Open.
We're heads up between Cabbage and Kamara, and in heads up play the button has the small blind, so John Cabbage limping in there and Kamara saying, OK, we'll see a flop.
9 of diamonds, 5 of clubs, 8 of hearts, seat 4. Check.
5, 8, 9, yeah?
Now, if you're holding 9-3 and you hit top pair, you really should bet. But he decides to trap, just checking there. And John Cabbage tossing in 10,000.
Call.
He's got top pair with a weak kicker, and he's just calling, and this is the problem with slow playing it. His hand really can only get better if he hits another 9 or a 3.
Queen of hearts.
If that card like that comes down, suddenly he won't know where he is.
Check.
He's walked into quicksand here, and on the river, well, that's 6. There's the danger of slow playing. Cabbage has made a straight with his 7, and from first to worst, Kamara has let this one off the hook. Essentially, he came in with bad cards, hooked a massive, great big fish, a nice ripe dinner for everybody. Suddenly, he let it get away. Should have netted it, put it on the bank. He didn't do it, and now Cabbage is caught up and overtaken him. And there's really nothing he can do but toss his cards away.
And Greg, which would you say is most important, pre-flop or post-flop?
Well, most professionals would estimate that they can outplay an amateur after the flop. Pre-flop, the cards do most of the talking. If you've got good cards, it's pretty easy to put money into the middle. But once that flop comes down, especially when the turn card comes down, the corridor is narrowing and you really have to be able to make some moves. That's when you can bluff players. If they don't have the best hand, can they call an all-in bet? Now, professionals are wily players, they're fearless, they're used to putting people on decisions. So I think that if you could master one particular side of the game, post-flop play would be where you're going to make most money.
Fantastic. Well, let's see an example from the British Poker Open 2006.
Six-handed at this table and another high-quality field. The button is on Marcel Lusk, the Flying Dutchman.
I'm tilting.
Lines 1 and 2,000. Carlos Citroni getting out of the way. Round to Mark Goodwin, who decides to bump it up to 6,000. That's a standard Hold'em raise, 3 times the big blind. He's got ace-10 offsuit, very strong. And that is clearing the field. Only the Devilfish left. Now, the Devilfish, here's a player who really does think he can outplay anybody, even the world's top pros, after the flop. So even though his own cards are unpromising, he's got a 6 and Jack of diamonds, he's decided to come in. They've both missed the flop. Now it's all down to who can pull the strings. The Devilfish is going to be first to act. Now, that's a lovely little bet, 8,000. And immediately Mark Goodwin folds.
First bluff of the day, boys. Don't mess with my blind.
Mark Goodwin is in such fear of the Devilfish there that he knows if he doesn't hit the flop, he's got to get out of the way. And that's years of work have gone into that. That wasn't just in isolation. That's because the fish knows that he can outplay every single man on the planet after the flop.
Now, Grub, in part 1 you talked about the importance of position. How important is position in post-flop?
Well, it's equally important. It changes subtly, though, because instead of the big blind having a slight advantage, post-flop, on the flop, the turn and the river, it's going to be the button that has the advantage, and that's the best position to be in. Again, imagine yourself like a general on top of the hill. You can see what everybody else is doing before you decide where to send your troops. Everybody else is kind of acting in the dark. They don't know what people are going to do behind them. What you sometimes find is that players who are out of position will make an aggressive attempt to take the hand down. They'll make what's called a continuation bet. If they raised pre-flop and everybody called, whatever the flop is, they'll put more money in, normally about half the pot, sometimes even more, just to say, yes, I had good hands before the flop. You all called me hoping to hit something. Well, I have hit something. And that's a good tactic.
Well, let's have a look at another example from the Poker Heaven Fast and Furious.
Four-handed at the Fast and Furious. And the action is going to be on young Jules Adamson. He's picked up ace-10 offsuit, four-handed, very, very strong, and he decides to plump in a raise up to 300 chips. And Richard Strummer Herbert gets out of the way. Paul Sandals, however, has picked up a suited king-queen, very handsome, and he makes the call. Ian Hope abandoned ship, so we're two-handed going to the flop. What's important to remember here is that Jules Adamson started the betting, and he's just got a call from the king-queen. Slightly passive play. He might read that as weakness. And the flop comes down, well, 3-5-3. They can both be slightly suspicious that the other will have missed this, but Jules Adamson, he's representing a pair or at least an ace. And Sandals, well, there's nothing there for him. He's got a runner and a flush draw. He probably knows that his king-queen is no good here. But it really wouldn't matter what Jules Adamson had here, because his continuation bet is strong enough to take the pot down, even if he had absolute rags.
So, Grub, can you tell us a bit about the different moves at the poker table?
Yeah, there's a whole array of them. We spoke about slow playing earlier and how it can be dangerous sometimes. But every now and then, you do want to slow play. Let's say you flop a straight or you flop the nut flush. You're fairly sure that no one's going to beat you in the next two cards. In this situation, you don't want to bet out too strongly and frighten people off. You want to try and lure them into betting into you. And then you can just all think about it, look agonised and make a little call, hoping they'll bet again on the turn and the river. And you're going to be 99% sure that you're going to win whatever happens. Then there's check raising. This is one of the most powerful moves in poker. That is when the betting comes round to you, you check it, somebody else bets at you, and then you steam over the top. Now, they are going to feel that they've been trapped. Even if they've got quite a strong card, they're going to think, my God, he's seen my strength and he's matched it with more strength of his own. So suddenly they have to have an extremely good hand to fold you. And that's a very good bluffer's move, the check raise.
And how does the betting differ after the turn on the river?
Well, of course, once you've seen the turn card, there are less possibilities. If you're chasing a flush and you've missed it, you've only got one more card instead of two to try and hit it. The same with a straight. So only really good hands tend to stay in the running there. On the river, well, all the cards you're going to get are out there. So you tend to see most rivers get checked. There are only two reasons to bet on the river. One is to try and extract value, or make what's called a value bet. If you've got an incredibly strong hand and you want to get a little bit more money or chips out of somebody else, you might make a small bet. If there's a pot of 3,000, you might just bet 500, and they're thinking, well, I'm getting 7 to 1 to call. I'll call just to see whether he's bluffing. The other reason to make a bet on the river is if you've got absolutely nothing, but you think you can scare the other guy off, in which case you would either make a nice big bet or a sort of suspicious-looking bet that's almost like, looks like a value bet in disguise. So the person might think, oh, God, he's made a small bet. That must mean he wants me to call. Sometimes people will see an all-in and go, he's frightened. Again, it's down to the individual psychology, how you read that player.
That's great, and thank you very much for all your help today. Join us next time and we're going to be teaching you how to avoid the common mistakes at the poker table, and we'll also be looking at the art of bluffing. Bye for now.